Great. So as I mentioned, I'm Betsy Hoodle at the ACM. Today we're joined by Julie Mallicott, the Senior Program Manager in the Science, Education, and Workforce Development at ORSS, which stands for Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education, and Paul Stanley, the Dobson Family Endowed Professor of Physics at Beloit College and the ACM Oak Ridge Science Semester Director. Michael Verdevec, Senior Program Administrator from ACM, is also joining us today. And any of us can answer your questions, but really we wanted Julie to talk a little bit more about Oak Ridge National Lab and her relationship with the program. And also she will be the one speaking mostly to how students can make their applications better. So as a little overview of the program, so Julie's going to be sharing her screen, but the program overview has a research internship, which is worth 8 credits, an interdisciplinary seminar worth 4 credits. Both of those happen at the lab, and then an advanced course with Dr. Stanley. And all the students live together in a housing complex near the Pellissippi State Community College, which is in the Hardin Valley area of Knoxville, Tennessee. There is transportation available between Pellissippi State and the lab on a weekday basis. So Julie, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and I think everyone can see Julie's slides.
Perfect, thanks Betsy. Hi everyone, thanks so much for tuning in today. And I'm just going to briefly share some information with you from my perspective about the Oak Ridge Science Semester. And so we'll get started. I first wanted to introduce you to ORAU, which is Oak Ridge Associated Universities. This is a university consortium that is focused on really providing these scientific research and education internships through partnerships with different universities and different entities. And last fiscal year, we hosted over 9,000 participants, and you can see there from 824 U.S. universities, et cetera, ranging all the way from pre-college all the way through dissertation thesis. ORAU is the Department of Energy contractor that manages the Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education. And ORSS, as Betsy mentioned earlier, is the entity that actually makes the appointments for the students. ORAU is sponsored by over 20 federal departments and agencies, and we've partnered with ORNL and their predecessors since 1946, establishing these internships. So we have a long-standing relationship with bringing in interns to have these educational opportunities at the lab. So moving forward to just a little bit of information about Oak Ridge National Lab, it is the largest science and energy laboratory in the Department of Energy complex. There are 17 labs in the DOE lab complex, and ORNL is the largest interdisciplinary laboratory. Again, you can read the mission there. I won't read that for you, but it was established in 1943 as part of the Manhattan Project. The lab currently employs over 5,000 employees, and approximately 2,200 of those are PhD level researchers. It is home to 3,200 research guests annually, and again, the interns make up that population. The 3 primary key research areas are science, energy, and national security. We have produced the largest solid 3D printed item to date. Also, we are home to the discovery of the latest element, Tennessean. So just a little bit about ORNL for you and the different types of research that's being conducted at the lab. Moving on into some specifics for when you're applying to the program. So the first one is to really do your homework. Take a look on ornl.gov and identify areas that are particularly of interest to you. With that said, make sure to read publication abstracts to actually gauge your interest in the research. So for example, if you're interested in biological sciences, you may have a specific area within that. And I would recommend that you look at some of the publications from some of the researchers and just read their abstracts to see if that's something that really piques your interest. We also definitely recommend that you contact researchers by email to discuss potential research opportunities. Maybe they have a need for an intern to do a literature review, for example, or for sampling work in the laboratory. And so if you contact those researchers directly and let them know that you've applied to the Oak Ridge Science Semester program, you can really get a sense for what the researcher does, what their research consists of, and what potentially an intern could take on as part of a project description for the term. Some key things that need to be thought about as you're applying also are to really express enthusiasm about participating in the research. And this would be both in your email and within the application essay. And so some ways to do that are to really speak to, and this goes into kind of the next slide, your willingness to learn new things. We did a poll of our mentors to say, what exactly do you look for in an application? So if you have a stack of 10 that all had some element of appeal to you, what makes one student's application stand out over another? And so the key thing that was common among all the mentors was that they look for that willingness to learn new things. The expectation is not that you have significant prior research experience or that you come in the door and hit the ground running, so to speak. These programs by nature are designed to truly be learning opportunities and to give you a real feel for what life is like at a national laboratory. So the final thing would be to make sure that your recommendations are strong. Select professors who know you well and can speak to your academic and research ability. One of the things that you want to avoid is selecting a recommendor whom maybe you haven't had as much contact with, or maybe you've only had them for one course and the experience was not favorable, in other words. So just make sure that those recommendations are strong. The mentors do really rely on the recommendations for the students in making decisions as well. So those are kind of the key tips for applying that I wanted to share with you today. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So Julie, maybe we'll stop sharing your slides, and
Sure.
that way we'll be able to see more of the attendees. And Julie, I think when you talk about articulating a research area, how specific or broad should someone be when they're talking about that research area, especially if they maybe haven't had contact with someone at the lab yet?
That's a great question. So one of the things that I recommend is to maybe pinpoint it down to a group at the group level. So if there's, I use the example of biological sciences, but let's look at chemical sciences. So there's a separations group. So I would recommend at the group level, sometimes if you get so specific with an individual researcher, if that researcher does not have an opportunity for that particular term, you may not be selected because other potential researchers may look at the application and go, oh, this student only wants to work with researcher X. So I recommend kind of making it a little more broad to maybe the overall group, and maybe within that group highlight some of the research that's being conducted.
And so Julie, when people are looking at the website and they see maybe a specific project, they would have to really drill down into that a little bit more, because it could be a project that somebody's put to the side or has finished a year ago or 2 years ago. So can you talk a little bit more about reading between those lines?
Sure. So sometimes it is difficult to navigate through a website down to the specific researcher and project area. One of the things that I generally tell students to do as a start is in just the general search bar to type in the either very broad, or if you know, a more specific area of research in which you're interested. And typically what you're going to net are a lot of publication results. And so I typically tell students to, pick 4 or 5, read those abstracts, and then contact that researcher. You'll also be able to tell by the date of that publication. If it's been a while, it may be a project that has already been put to rest, or it may be one that's in a holding pattern. And on the ORNL just general homepage, you'll find highlights of specific current research projects as well.
And Julie, as part of the research internship, the students take part in an interdisciplinary seminar. Can you talk a little bit more about that interdisciplinary seminar?
Absolutely. So our seminar typically, when we're on campus, is every Wednesday morning, and there are, as Betsy mentioned, it happens every week throughout the term. And those seminars are comprised of scientific research talks where we bring researchers in to speak about their research. It's not necessarily designed to teach you something, but rather to just expose you to the many facets of research that are going on at ORNL. As I mentioned, it's the largest interdisciplinary laboratory, so there are many different types of research. It's a multi-purpose lab. The seminars are also comprised of professional development opportunities. So each term we provide a complete range of professional development, from how to write a general audience scientific seminar, how to build a powerful LinkedIn profile, how to develop an effective resume. There's a laundry list of those that we offer every term. We also build in laboratory tours as part of that scientific seminar, where we actually go to one of the facilities on campus at ORNL and we have a tour guide. These are excellent opportunities because oftentimes during the fall and spring term, we're able to offer tours that are not available to the general public. So you really get to go in to kind of see the different types of facilities that are available across ORNL.
Great. Thanks, Julie.
Sure thing.
We do have a question in the chat. And so what if someone pinpoints their research interest down to a group and no one in the group is able to take on a student? And then what if the student's interested in more than one group's research? So I guess there's two questions there.
Sure. So typically how the placements are handled is, once the applications have been received and the students have been selected to participate in the program pending that placement, I will begin reaching out to the groups that are identified within the students' applications. And so that's why it's always a good idea to select more than one group, is because if that particular group does not have an opportunity for a placement, then I can move on to a second choice. The students do participate with only one group for the term. So sometimes we have students that will come and they'll say, oh, while I've been here, I've learned about this other group. And that may be an opportunity for a future internship. But once the appointment is solidified, the student participates for 16 weeks with that particular group. It also looks like we have another question about, is prior research experience required? It is not required. So as I mentioned, generally the mentors do not expect the students to come in and hit the ground running. We typically talk about the internship having 3 distinct phases, with the first one being you're going to do a lot of listening and reading. The second would be the hands-on experience, and the third would be reporting about what you've learned. Prior research experience, if we have 2 applicants that are similarly ranked, it may be more favorable depending on the project. If prior research experience, if a student has had a research experience, for example, in computational sciences where they've coded quite a bit in Python, that may be advantageous to a researcher, but by and large, prior research experience is not a requirement. Great questions.
Julie, how long does the matching process usually take? Just so students know.
So generally, with the timing of when this program is typically in the fall, we'll start the placement process. The students are selected, they're notified, and it generally takes 1 to 2 months. It's not just the matching process. There are some internal processes that also have to happen through ORNL. So I would suspect the same with the spring internship. That matching process can take up to 2 months.
And I think Paul Stanley has a question.
Yeah, hi, Julie. The students come from a variety of different backgrounds, and the relationships with their faculty could be referring to them as Professor Stanley, or it could be hi, Paul, or even hey, you. What is a good level of approach to deal with that first email that one might send to a prospective researcher at Oak Ridge? Where does one gauge it?
That's a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. So, typically, I always advise students to address the mentor as Dr. whomever, especially for that first initial contact. Even when students meet on campus for the first time when they start their appointment, we generally always tell the students to begin the address with doctor. Most of the mentors there, by and large, will tell you just call me, call me Julie, for example. But to begin that initial communication, I would definitely recommend that address be fairly formal.
And is there any first paragraph keywords that should be present in this opening email? It could be a frightening thing for a student to reach out to some of these researchers. What does one say in that first paragraph that is going to catch their attention and not offend them and get them to want to read the rest?
So another great question. I think I would start with something in the subject line of, potential internship opportunity. And then when you would begin the address, it could be dear Dr. whomever. And I would start out really showing that enthusiasm by saying, I'm a current undergraduate student at X college and have read the abstract on your publication titled da da da, and I've currently applied for the Oak Ridge Science semester and I'm interested in speaking with you about a potential internship opportunity for the spring term 2021 or whatever the term may be. That really shows that you've done your homework and that you've actively sought them out and that you're really enthusiastic about what their research consists of.
Julie, can you talk a little bit about what divisions, and for students interested, we talked a little bit about chemistry and biology, but what other majors and departments could students come from?
So it's the opportunity primarily lies in, of course, in the STEM field. So there's chemistry, physics, computational sciences, biological sciences, environmental sciences. There's a whole list of disciplines, and even delving on down into more specific areas. There are, if you look at the ORNL website there and you go to just the main page information about, which I'll be glad to send you a link, Betsy, if you'd like to forward it out to the attendees today, and it will kind of break down it'll kind of break down the different divisions within ORNL. And we have students across every division in ORNL, so they're not specifically limited to, for example, chemistry or biological sciences.
Great. So we're opening this up for questions, if anyone has questions. So one question, Julie, we sometimes get is whether or not sophomores, students with sophomore standing, so finishing their first year and going to be in their second year during the program, are sophomores allowed to apply, or would they be sort of deferred to the next year?
So generally speaking, sophomores have been allowed to apply before, and it really depends on the project, to be honest, in terms of placement and selection. Sometimes the mentors and project needs and learning opportunities will be for more of that upperclassmen, but often opportunities are available at the sophomore level as well, particularly if it's a new project just getting started. So we would definitely encourage sophomores to apply with the understanding that there's a possibility they could be deferred.
And for our spring program, Dr. Stanley is teaching a course for the students. And Dr. Stanley, would you speak a little bit about the course that you've proposed, if students haven't seen it already on the website?
So the course I've proposed is in nonlinear systems. So it's concerned with chaos theory, which is it's an area that is often associated with physics and math, but actually stretches far beyond that. Chemistry, biology, economics are systems that have this nonlinear behavior. It's targeted towards the junior senior level. The expectation is that students will have some facility with calculus, but it's not necessary that they be a math major or a physics major in order to succeed I've taught similar courses to this, and biology students, chemistry students have done just fine in it and profited from it, discovering that there's a lot of chaos in life, maybe more this year than in other years, but it's an apropos course. There will be some computational work associated with it because chaos takes a lot of work.
Okay, thanks for that. And just so everyone knows, that course that's directed or by the faculty member on site, it changes every year, so, or every semester. So normally this program is run in the fall. This year with COVID, we're planning to run a spring 2021 cohort and then a fall 2021 cohort. And the person that's scheduled to teach in fall of 2021, her name is Phoebe Lostro. She's a professor of molecular biology at Colorado College. So Julie, is there anything else that people should know about applying, what to include maybe in their essay, what not to include? Is there something like oversharing?
I would definitely limit the amount of truly just personal experiences that don't necessarily apply to your ability to participate in an off-campus internship program. With that said, I do think it's important to share experiences for maybe things that show your perseverance or maybe your ability to adapt to new situations, because this obviously is a different situation than being on your home campus. And certainly any type of computer, technical, or research experience that you may have had would be very important to share within that essay as well. I would also recommend highlighting why you're interested in this particular field. Do you have a long-standing history of always being interested in this particular field? Or is this just something that you're trying to figure out if this is what you want to do? Sometimes when students have these types of internships, they will say, gosh, I really love this, and now I've decided to pursue a PhD in this and work at a national lab. Other times students will go, and this doesn't happen very often, but will go, gosh, I really didn't care for this, and I don't think I'll pursue this particular avenue going forward. Both of those are huge success stories. The first in being that you've pinpointed down what you want to do, right? But the second also that you've not spent more time, money, commitment into something that you really didn't care for. So both are true success stories.
And we have a question if a cover letter is necessary along with the resume. Certainly for the ACM application portion, we do not need a cover letter with the resume. And Julie can speak to whether or not Oak Ridge folks would expect to see a cover letter as well.
We would not expect to see a cover letter. Primarily, they're going to look at the essay portion for any details that you might even cover in a cover letter. So the cover letter is not necessary.
And are there any divisions or groups that do not allow interns?
No, as I mentioned, we have interns across most of the divisions and groups. There are some divisions and groups that allow different types of interns in other programs. So we have some, for example, in our facilities group, that those interns would come in through another program because it's more STEM supported as opposed to a pure scientific research opportunity. And so that would be something that the Oak Ridge Science semester students would probably not be secure placements there.
So a question about transportation and whether or not students can bring their own transportation. Yes, they can. It's not required. And Julie, could you talk a little bit about how students would get access to the lab if they're especially taking their own transportation?
Sure. So what happens when when the placements are all secured, you will receive an official appointment authorization letter from ORSS that we talked about a little bit earlier. And with that, your division will put in a request for a badge for you, and that's your access into the lab every day. So there are guard portals. There are 2 different ones into ORNL because it is a secure campus. And so once your badge is approved, if you're a driver, you will actually just show your badge every day as you come through the guard portal line, and that's what gets you in onto campus. And then you have specific designation on your badge. It actually has a chip reader, and that allows you access into individual buildings. You're typically authorized into the building where my office is located and your appointment location building. So in other words, you don't have access to everything across the lab. It's more by who actually needs access to individual facilities. Parking on campus is somewhat at a premium, although you are encouraged to bring your own vehicle if you have one. But there are designated carpooling parking passes, and parking is generally not too far away from your appointment location. Some buildings have parking directly outside, while others, for example, my building, the closest parking lot is about 1/3 of a mile away.
And then another question, are there some divisions or groups that do not prefer students from other but related majors?
Could you be a little more specific?
Sure. Desmonita, would you care to expand on your question? Go ahead.
Hi, so I was wondering, say for example, I'm a physics major and I haven't declared a math major yet, but I have a background in like physics, math, and computer science. And so, like on paper, I'm still a physics major, but am I allowed to apply to say for a position in a group that's very focused on computational research or something like that, that isn't exactly physics?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, it's the largest interdisciplinary lab. So kind of gone are the days when the biologists only interact with their fellow biologists. Particularly in the physics area, we have a number of students that we place who maybe haven't yet declared that second major or minor. And a lot of the physics students have a great deal of computational experience or math experience. So yes, absolutely. I would definitely encourage you when you list physics as your major on your application, however, to make sure your essay reflects your desire and your experience with other things as potential researchers are looking at your application. Great question.
I think we had a question we missed in the chat. And so is the tentative dependent? And Christina, could you expand on your question a little bit?
Sorry, I was typing a little quickly there. I just want to know about the status. So is this something that's going to move forward that students can know that once their application is accepted that it's planned to move forward definitively? Or is this kind of a speculation that we plan on it if the pandemic, is not, I guess I had a lot of students apply for summer research positions that were accepted that had them canceled a week before they began. And I want to make sure I understand what the current status of this application process is.
Sure. So ACM intends to make a decision no later than November 1st about the go, no go of the program for the spring program that would start in January. And we expect that many of the campuses in the ACM and GLCA will determine their go, no go for programs in October. And so we'll have all of that information as well. And then by that point, we'll also know what does the COVID situation look like in Tennessee, especially in the counties where the students would be. And if the lab is open and accepting visitors, of course, if their staff isn't yet back on campus, that would mean the program wouldn't be able to operate either.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Just knowing that the November cutoff for the ACM is very helpful. Thanks.
Sure. Other questions? Well, if there's no other questions, Julie, is there anything else that you would tell students as they're putting together an application for either spring of 21 or fall of 21? any kind of last minute wrap up?
Again, I think I would just encourage you to do your homework and to make sure that that enthusiasm about a new learning opportunity is present in your essay. Those really are the key things that mentors are looking for. You know, what a mentor doesn't want to see is, you know, something that ORNL did 20 years ago listed on an application, or just go, gosh, I'd really like to intern at ORNL doing something. So they really, really want to see that folks have truly done their homework and are just so excited to learn about X during their internship experience.
Sure. Okay, we've got a couple of questions. If you have questions after this that you think about later, you can email Michael Verdevac. I think most of you have his contact information. If not, it's on the ACM website, so ACM.edu/ORSS, and under the contact information, Michael will be there. Another question, if a student is accepted to the program in the spring and the spring program is canceled, would they have to reapply in the fall? The only thing that we would, if you had a complete application for the program in the spring and it was accepted, it would be pending placement for sure with your Oak Ridge group. And we would only require you to have an updated resume and transcript. So those would be the things. Well, we won't keep you for the remainder of the time. If there aren't any other questions, I want to thank you all for taking some time today to join this session, and especially to thank Julie for all the great information on making applications stronger. And again, follow-up questions can go to Michael, and if necessary, he can forward on to Julie for any specific Oak Ridge related questions that are specific for placements. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your morning, and hopefully we'll be seeing a lot of you in the future.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.